Part 2, Chapter 17. So when? Lisa asked. Dr. Dan grunted unintelligibly to acknowledge he'd heard her, but he continued examining her without comment. Well, Lisa said again a moment later, her impatience getting the better of her. Her mother clucked her tongue softly. Don't be so difficult, her eyes said. Lisa frowned, turned again to the doctor. Well, she repeated. We'll see, he said finally. That's what you said yesterday, she snapped, resenting the whine that had crept into her voice yet unable to dispel it. And the day before that. He had told her during her first week at the rehab that her fixators would stay in for at least a month to ensure her fractures knit together correctly, and it was the phrase "at least" that she worried about now. She knew it was necessary, but the network of metal pins and rods was excruciating, limiting Lisa's range of motion and preventing her from getting into a comfortable position, no matter what she tried. And if she did happen to find a position that was less painful than others, the small relief was short-lived because nurses came in several times a day to change the dressings around her pin sites to keep them free from infection. Come on, she pleaded. You must have some idea. When he didn't respond, she continued, Then what about my catheter? Can you tell me that much? Concluding his examination, the doctor turned to her. Lisa, there are no guarantees. Every patient is different. You can't rush your rehabilitation. Any shortcuts now would only complicate matters later on. We have to take it one day at a time. Don't rush your rehab. Now there's a bumper sticker, Lisa thought sarcastically. The familiar wave of dread settling over her once more. Getting the cast off her arm a few days after she'd arrived at the center had given her an emotional boost, but that had soon faded. The only thing that managed to push back the depression constantly weighing on her now was her anticipation that perhaps today, tomorrow, even the next day would be her last wearing of her fixators. But Dr. Dan refused to give her any assurance that his at least a month timeline might not extend to 5 weeks or 6. She squeezed her eyelids shut, trying to keep her disappointment from spilling out. Her mother leaned over and put a hand on hers. Now, Lisa, like the doctor says, you don't want to rush things. No, that's where you're wrong, Lisa wanted to scream. I do want to rush things. I'm tired of fixators. I'm tired of physio. I'm tired of this bed, this room, my wheelchair. I'm tired of eating food I hate. I'm tired of every goddamn part of every goddamn day in this place. But most of all, I am tired of pretending to be strong. I did that enough for Ellen. I can do it for you too. But of course, she didn't say any of those things. Instead, she just nodded, smiled, forced back her tears, and allowed herself to slide deeper into melancholy. You did a great job with Stephen the other day, Reef, said Carly. He doesn't always respond as well to strangers as he did with you. In fact, some of the patients in the unit commented on how quiet he was that afternoon. Reef nodded non-committally. He certainly wasn't there because he wanted to be. But each day was one day closer to the end of the shit. If nothing else, there was that to celebrate. I've got another patient I'd like you to meet, the nurse explained. Reeve shrugged. Whatever, he said. He had in fact hoped he'd be assigned to the vegetable again. It was weird being in the same room with an adult who drooled and pissed his pants, but he actually preferred that to having to make conversation with someone he didn't know. That Brett person hadn't been hard to talk to, but she certainly wasn't like the rest of the patients in this place. His skin crawled as he watched them lurch and stagger down the hall like zombies from Night of the Living Dead, one of those old movies he'd seen on late-night cable when he was living with the Barkers. We've got a girl here about the same age as you who's been having a rough time of it. I thought I'd get you to visit her for a bit. Reeve grimaced. Doesn't she have family or friends to do that? Her mother is in here every day, but there aren't many young people who come. A couple friends came at first, but they haven't been around for a while. That happens sometimes. Young people find this a difficult place to be. No shit, Reeve thought. So what happened to her? Car accident, the nurse explained. Reeve's mind suddenly conjured the mangled Subaru he'd seen in the courtroom photo. What's her name? He asked uneasily, thinking again of the girl he'd read about in the newspapers following the accident. Elizabeth something. He didn't recall her last name. In fact, he tried not to think about the accident since the hearing, deliberately turning his mind away from the event and the emotions it stirred in him. Keeping busy on the greenhouse had helped during the day, but in the evening, when things quieted down, it was easier for the memories to return. Sometimes they came back when he was watching TV, a car crash or a courtroom scene invoking recollections that bloomed suddenly in his head. Sometimes they came in dreams, nightmares that left him sitting on the side of the bed, dripping sweat. Elizabeth something. He'd never seen a picture of her, but he didn't need a photo of her parents to remember them. To remember the way her mother had pointed at him outside the courthouse, cursing the judge's ruling, then cursing him. Suddenly, the newspaper photo of the girl's parents swam into memory. Their name printed beneath their angry faces. Morrison. Elizabeth Morrison. Lisa Hemming, said the nurse. I think you'll like her. I need to leave early today, Lisa, Diane said. I have a new client who's opening up an office downtown, wants a completely new look, and I told him I'd meet him there this afternoon with some preliminary sketches. She gathered her things and leaned over to kiss her daughter's forehead. Lisa smiled, feeling none of the warmth she pretended. She was glad her mother was getting back into her work, glad she'd be busier. Lisa was tired of the false front she had to wear when her mother came. At least with Brett she could be herself. Her mother, on the other hand, was always looking for reassurance. Sleeping well, eating more, feeling better, and of course her favorite. Is it getting any easier? Like any of this could ever get easier. Lisa smiled and slipped more deeply into depression each day. Her mother continued brightly. You should see how the previous leaseholder decorated the place. Lots of wall coverings and area rugs with zigzag patterns. But then there's this weird lace hanging everywhere. Sounds like a cross between Santa Fe and Victoria's Secret, Brett commented from the other side of the room. Diane laughed aloud, and Lisa could tell she was glad her daughter had such an exuberant roommate. What fun she must think we have when everyone's gone, Lisa thought. A couple of goddamn girl guides sharing campfire stories. Christ. She forced another smile, grimaced when she found herself grinding her teeth. That's really more accurate than you think, Brett, Diane explained. The business was supposed to offer investment counseling. Turns out the owner was running an escort service. Seems like a good combination, Brett observed wryly. I imagine an escort could suggest some pretty interesting places to put someone's money. Diane laughed again. Good point, but the police didn't feel the same way. The owner goes on trial sometime this fall. Meanwhile, the man who's leasing the place now wants a complete overhaul. She turned to Lisa. It's going to be a huge job, honey. I'll be really busy the next couple weeks. There was a moment's silence as Lisa, caught off guard, stared blankly at her mother. She'd been thinking about her next morphine shot, calculating in her head how much time before it arrived. Imagined its numb embrace. That's good, she said, wondering without caring what could possibly be good. Your mother's a neat person, Brett said after Diane had left. When Lisa didn't respond, she continued. You ever help her with her decorating? A moment passed. No. Ever think you'd like to try it? Another moment passed. No. Ever want to try the escort business? If Brett expected a reaction, a laugh maybe, or even a grin, she was disappointed. Lisa ignored her, returned to counting minutes, seconds, was both surprised and pleased when she willed Carly to appear in the doorway. Hello, you two, the nurse said. You've got company. Lisa heard Brett chuckle. Just what the doctor ordered, her roommate said.